マイクテスト。はい、どうも、ねことらです。今回はね、こちらの The Stanley Parable っていうね、ゲームをやっていきたいと思います。こちらのゲームなんですけど、ナレーターに沿って従うか、逆らうかっていうのを選択できます。僕、このゲームをやったことがないんで、今回初になります。早速、やっていこうかな。ちょっとどういうゲームか把握はできてないんですけど、従うか従わないかだけらしいんで、まずはちょっと試していきたいと思います。やっていきましょうか。
This is the story of a
これ
man
は
named
スタンリーという
Stanley.
名の男の物語。
Stanley worked for a
スタン
company
リ
in
ーは
a
大
big
きなビル
building
の会社
where
で
he was
従業
employee
員番号
number
と
427.
427として働いていまし
Employee
た。
number 427's job was simple.
何
He sat at
捕ま
his
ってん
desk
の
in
これ。
room
キーボードの
427
ボタンを
and
押
he
すだけ。
pushed
うわ、
buttons on
地
the
獄
keyboard.
そう。
Orders came to him
指令
through
は
a
つける
monitor
モニ
on
ターを
his
通してき
desk,
ました。
telling him what buttons
ど
to
のボタンをどれ
push,
ぐらい長く
how
押せ
long
ばい
to
いかを
push them,
教えてくれるの
and
で
in
す。
what order.
しんど
This is what employee
従業員は
427 did
何ヶ月も
every
何年
day,
もこの作業
every
を
month
日々繰り
of
返してい
every
ました。
year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending,
魂
Stanley
引き裂かれる
relished
よね、これ。
every moment that the
スタンリーは
orders
司令があるのに楽しんでいました。
though he had been
まる
made
でこの仕
exactly
事をする
for
ため
this
に生まれてき
job.
たかのように。
And Stanley
マジ
was happy.
スタンリーは幸せでした。僕が無理か
And
も。
then one day
そしてあ
something
る
very
日、何だ
peculiar
かとても
happened.
奇妙なことが起きた
Something
の
that would
です。
forever
そんな
change
スタンリーを永遠に変え
Stanley.
てしまうような何か
Something he
が
would never
彼
quite
が決して
forget.
忘れることないであろう。何
He
か
had been at his desk for
1時
nearly
間
an
近く
hour
デスク
when
に
he realized that not one single
指令が
order
来ない
had
ことに気
arrived
づ
on
い
the
た。
monitor for him to
なんだ
follow.
なんだ。
No one had showed up to
何
give
しに
him
出す人も会議を聞く
instructions,
人も挨
call a
拶
meeting,
さえ
or
誰も
even
いませ
say
ん。
hi. Never
入
in
社してから
all
一度だっ
his
てこ
years
んな
at the
完全
company had this
孤
happened.
立はありませんで
This
した。
complete isolation. Something was very
明らかに
clearly
何か変だ。
wrong. Shocked,
ショックで固まった
frozen
スタンリーは
solid,
長いこと身動きが
Stanley
取れ
found
なくなっていま
himself
した。
unable to move for the longest time. But
怖い
as
よ
he
な。
came to his wits and
しかし
regained his
落ち
senses,
着きを取り戻
he
すと
got up
デ
from
ス
his
クを離
desk
れ彼
and
の部屋を
stepped
出
out
て
of
行
his
きました。
office.
おお、こっから何もないの？でも嫌だな、こんな部屋に閉じ込められてんの。今の時間は11時20分過ぎ。朝のってことだよね。明るいから。昼ってこと？開かない。開かない。
All of his co-workers were
彼の
gone.
同僚たちは
What
全
could
員い
it
なくなって
mean?
しまったのです。
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply
鍵
missed
閉
a
められ
memo.
た。見落としたのでしょ
No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
う。でも電源ついてんじゃん。あ、切れた。
Stanley went around touching every little thing in the office, but it didn't make a single
There was
difference,
intention.
nor did it advance the
Okay.
story in any way.
めっちゃ、外何も見えんじゃん、明るすぎて。やばいね、これ。ジャンプはできない。しゃがむことはできる。切れた。あ、触っちゃうと切れちゃうんだ。ああ、そこは開いてないんだね。ここも開いてない。なんか、見落としてるものない？見落としてるものはないな。時間全然経ってないじゃん。これね。
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left.
閉められたんですけど？ドアどっちに行けって言ってた今。左行こう。
This
あ、
was
右行こ
not the correct way to the meeting room,
う。
and Stanley knew it
これは会議室へ
perfectly
の正しい道
well.
じゃない。
Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it.
俺、違う方向入ったんだね、今。俺は、抗ったってことだな、この会社に。
Ah, yes, truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate,
Hora,
beautifully constructed
drinks.
room. Stanley simply stood here,
Like,
drinking it all in.
あ、座れない。別に。座らせてもくれない。マジで。
Yes, but eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
いや、左のドアに入ってないよ。これ左のドアに戻ったってこと今。そういうこと？
And so he detoured through the
Nani?
maintenance section, walked straight ahead to the opposite door, and got back on track.
俺正しいドアまで来ちゃったってこと？
Yet there was not a single
こ
person
こに
here
もいない。まあ
either.
いないよね。
Feeling a wave of
いるわけないじゃ
disbelief,
ん。
Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
まあ行くか。開くじゃん。
Stanley stepped into the broom
Anyone
closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
俺は下に降りる。
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all? None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. I'm dreaming! He yelled. This is all a dream. What a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer. He thought to himself, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground. Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical star field, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. For himself. Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain beyond a doubt that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up, he thought to himself. I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please, it's all I want. I want my apartment, and my wife, and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay.
何
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black. This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she considered the strange man. He was obviously crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was to be normal. I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't. It was comforting to think this. And in a certain way, seeing this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day. The very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this. So it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body.
Sorry.
And then she turned and ran.
Sorry! 俺死んだんや。あ、もう一回やり直せる。
All of his co-workers were gone.
やり直しだって。
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
なるほど。指示に従わなかったら死ぬんだ。
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left, up to his boss's office. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
決まった。パンダの置物ね。エレベーターある。でもエレベーターさ、信用ならないんだよね。
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this. Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
おお、すげえ。わかんな。何これ。大丈夫なのこれ、降りて。指示に従った。で、指示に従えばいいのこれは。
Descending deeper into the building, Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long. Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
Escape って書いてある。マインドコントロール室。
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
これに従っていこうか。マインドコントロール室だって。
Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
ずっと見られていた。一個だけなんか空いてるよあれ。あ、違った。これは
？This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly?
え、これは？入った。
No. He refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never! It was unthinkable. Wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world? But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions. Happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working. All of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
わかんないし、先に進むか。なんちゃらパワーとかじゃん。え、すごこのモニター。
And when at last he found the source. Oh, Stanley, you didn't just activate the controls, did you? After they kept you enslaved all these years, you go and you try to take control of the machine for yourself. Is that what you wanted? Control? Oh, Stanley, I applaud your effort, I really do. But you need to understand, there's only so much that machine can do. You were supposed to let it go. Turn the controls off and leave. If you want to throw my story off track, you're going to have to do much better than that. I'm afraid you don't have nearly the power you think you do. For example, and I believe you'll find this pertinent, Stanley suddenly realized he had just initiated the network's emergency detonation system. In the event that this machine is activated without proper DNA identification, nuclear detonators are set to explode, eliminating the entire complex. How long until detonation then? Let's say 2 minutes. Ah, now this is making things a little more fun, isn't it, Stanley? It's your time to shine. You are the star. It's your story now. Shape it to your heart's desires. Oh, this is much better than what I had in mind. What a shame we have so little time left to enjoy it. Mere moments until the bomb goes off. But what precious moments each one of them is. More time to talk about you, about me, where we're going. What all this means, I barely know where to start. What's that? All right, I'm in a good mood. You're gonna die anyway. I'll tell you exact you free. Of course, that was merely in this instance of the story. Sometimes when I tell it, or I let it burn to a crisp. I have to say this, though. This version of events has been rather amusing. Sure, whatever I come up with on the next go-around will be even better. My goodness, only 34 seconds left. But I'm enjoying this so much. You know what? To hell with it. I'm going to put some extra time on the clock. Why not? These are precious additional seconds. Time doesn't grow on trees. What's the matter, Stanley? Solved? Do you have any idea what your purpose in this place is? Stanley, you're in for quite a disappointment. Will you cling desperately to your frail life, or will you let it go peacefully? Another choice. Make it count. It's all the same to me, all a part of the joke. And believe me, I will be laughing at every second of your inevitable life from the moment we fade in until the moment I say happily ever after. And commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again. Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over? Yes! He had won! He had defeated the machine! Unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him. For it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door. Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation, the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
クリアなんだ。あ、また戻された。なるほど。
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility. Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley would meet his violent death. The door behind him was not shut. Stanley still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track. At this point, Stanley was making a conscious, concerted effort to walk forward and willingly confront his death.
ああ、終わりを迎えるのだ。なるほどね。
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley was inched closer and closer to his demise, he reflected that his life had been of no consequence whatsoever. Stanley can't see the bigger picture. He doesn't know the real story, trapped forever in his narrow vision of what this world is. Perhaps his death was of no great loss, like plucking the eyeballs from a blind man. And so he resigned and willingly accepted this violent end to his brief and shallow life. Farewell, Stanley.
死ぬのか。ありがとう。
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator, as Stanley was led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, Stanley was obliterated as the machine crushed every bone in his body, killing him instantly.
これは走馬灯だというのか。え？
And yet it would be just a few minutes before Stanley would restart the game, back in his office, as alive as ever. What exactly did the narrator think he was going to accomplish? When every path you can walk has been created for you long in advance, death becomes meaningless, making life the same. Do you see now? Do you see that Stanley was already dead from the moment he hit start?
スタンリーのパソコン？なんでスタンリーのパソコンこんなとこにあんの？あ、これ、俺の部屋だ。お、俺の部屋いっぱいあんじゃん。
Oh, look at these two. How they wish to destroy one another. How they wish to control one another. How they both wish to be free. Can you see? Can you see how much they need one another? Do choose it. Don't let time choose for you. Don't let